Why does this Blue Jackets preseason feel different from Blue Jackets preseasons in the past? We're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lots of stuff I want to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about the preview of the Penguins game because there's some interesting things happening with the defense pairs that I specifically want to talk about. And also Kent Johnson is getting his chance on Adam Fantilli's wing. You'll love to see it. So we want to talk about that. I want to talk about why this preseason specifically feels different. I talked a little bit yesterday about, we're tempering our expectations, but is there something to be optimistic about here? So we'll talk about that. And the injury curse begins. Gavin Brindley is out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll talk about that as well. But let's start off talking about tonight's game, which is a mostly NHL roster. Handful of guys still not on the outside looking in, but still trying to cement their place, I think is probably the best way to put it. I'm just pulling up what the roster is now because where is it? Here it is. Okay, so like I said, the defense is more interesting to me. We'll go through the forwards first. Jenna, Monahan, Marchenko, Van Riemsdyk, Fantilli, Kent Johnson, Voronkov, Cole Sillinger, Chinakov, Pucher, Corelli, Olivier. There's really only kind of one question mark here, which is Mikhail Pucher. They seem to still be auditioning, that fourth line left wing spot that was typically taken by just a Danforth, and previous to that, Eric Robinson. It's been Pucher, it's been Malatesta, who's been sent down to the minors, and it is Owen Sillinger as well. So Owen Sillinger got his chance in the most recent preseason game, I believe, so they're putting Pucher in there to see how he does. I still think that Owen Sillinger has the advantage there. I think his game is more suited to a fourth line role, but it's interesting to see Mikhail Pucher continuing to stick around. Obviously, he played a handful of games last season for the Blue Jackets, was a fourth round pick, I believe, of these Columbus Blue Jackets. He's still only, I think, 22 years old. He played 17 games for the Blue Jackets last season. So if you're getting any NHL games out of your fourth round pick, that already feels like a success. Can he turn that into a regular role? We'll find out. But it's great to see him still sticking around. It's a similar story with Sillinger. Obviously, Owen Sillinger, that is, obviously undrafted, played well enough in Cleveland last season to get an NHL deal out of it, and now is pushing for an NHL spot. So we'll see who wins that battle. And that's really the only kind of forward battle that's left in terms of who is going to be on the team. They're just figuring out, for the most part, I think, who Fantilli's line mates are going to be, because that Jenna, Monahan, Marchenko line, I think, is pretty set. Should it be? I'm not sure about that, but I talked about the asset. I'm not going to get back into that today. But with Brindley out, he again was on the outside looking in. We'll talk about his injury in a minute here, but I love that Kent Johnson is getting a chance on Adam Fantilli's wing. I think that line is going to be someone else said it best, actually, underneath at Jackets Insider's original tweet. Dylan McNeely said that JVR Fantilli KJ line is going to feed families, LOL. Truly. And I think that line is gonna feast tonight. I'm really, really excited about that. I love to see Johnson getting into the top 6. He has more than earned it over his preseason play thus far. I'm still not sold on Jenner and JVR as your top 2 left wings, but if they're going to put Johnson in the top 6, I will deal with that. Because my worry with Jenner and JVR was that they were going to bury Johnson on the third line left wing spot beneath those two veterans. And that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. So we'll see how that line goes. I'm expecting big and also fun things from that line. Voronkov, Sillinger, Chinikov, we've seen before. I like that line. It's not going to be flashy, but it is going to be effective, I think. So that's kind of my thoughts on the forward group. The defenseman is the more interesting group, though, I think. Tonight's game, we're doing Werenski and Provorov, which I'm going to get into in detail in a minute. And then Jet Christensen with Damon Severson, and then Jack Johnson with David Jiricek. Then Tarasov and Merzlikins in goal. Merzlikins was in the starter crease, so I assume Merzlikins tonight, probably Tarasov tomorrow night. But what I want to talk about here is Ivan Provorov on the right side is so interesting to me, because it really, really feels like they are trying to make room for Denton Mateychuk, who was excellent in the most recent preseason game for the Blue Jackets against the Blues. I believe it was. All of the opponents have kind of blurred into one. This is the problem when you play 8 preseason games in like the space of 2 weeks. Putting Provorov on the right side is interesting. He is not the guy that I would have expected them to move. I have seen them try Mateychuk on the right side. Harris is an option to try on the right-hand side. But moving Provorov over there is interesting. That's going to be... I'm fascinated to see how that works. I think, I've been fairly vocal in my opinion of Provorov as a defenseman, and especially as a defensive defenseman, which he is not. But I wonder if moving him to the right side, is that going to change something about his game? Is he going to approach things differently? Is putting him with Werenski going to make a difference in how he plays his game? We could see a very different player out of Provorov in this game, and if they can figure out a way to put him on the right-hand side and open up a spot for Mateychuk, I think that is going to be really interesting. Of course, what that does mean is Jiricek likely on the outside, looking in. If they move Provorov over, then my guess is that it's going to be something along the lines of Werenski, Provorov, Harris, Severson, Mateychuk, Gabranson, with Johnson as the 7th guy. And it really sucks that they're going to have to choose between one of Jiricek and one of Mateychuk. I do think Mateychuk has impressed more at preseason, but I think Jiricek might be slightly more NHL ready. So we'll see. Obviously, getting sent to Cleveland for either of them is not the end of the world, but it's going to be frustrating, I think. That was really kind of the most interesting part of the lineup, I thought, was putting Provorov on the right side. It's great to see Christensen still kind of fighting for a role as well. The Blue Jackets still have 9 defensemen in camp to fill 7 spots, essentially. Well, 6 plus 1. Christensen, Jack Johnson, Mateychuk, Werenski, Provorov, Harris, Gabranson, Jiricek, and Severson. Like, that's 9 NHL defensemen right there. I believe Christensen might require waivers to go down to Cleveland, which is not ideal, but GMs are cowards and don't claim people on waivers anyway, so it's probably fine. It really does feel like the decision is coming down to, does Mateychuk make the roster or does Jiricek make the roster? Because Werenski, Provorov, Gabranson, Severson are all going to get spots. Johnson isn't getting sent down, and Harris is not getting sent down. So really the conversation is, which of the 2 young kids do they want to add to that those 6 defensemen? And right now it's looking like they're going to see if they can figure out a way to make a hole in the lineup for Mateychuk, which is really interesting. On a similar side with the forwards, there's, including Brindley, who obviously injured now and is not going to be involved in that push. There's 15 forwards, including Brindley, so 14 healthy forwards. Cole Sillinger, who obviously a lock, Crowley a lock, Voronkov a lock, Owen Sillinger and Dylan Gambrell, who is another guy that's kind of pushing for that 4th line role. Adam Fantilli, JVR, Monahan, all locks. Olivier lock, Jenner lock, Chinikov lock, Future 4th line role, Marchenko lock, Johnson lock. So the roster is basically set outside of they have to send 3 players down, I think. they need to set a 23-man roster by Monday. Obviously, I talked a little bit yesterday. They don't have to be salary cap compliant by that Monday, but they do need to have a 23-man roster due. So if I could do the math on the fly, that's going to be 2 goaltenders, probably 8 defensemen is my guess, and then 13 forwards, or it could be 14 forwards and 7 defensemen, depending on who's healthy, whatever, etc., etc., etc. But camp, I think, has been really interesting. Preseason has been really interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the final roster is going to be. It does feel very much like it was mostly set before camp even started, but there's been some really fun surprises. Like, I think no one expected Mateychuk to come in as strong as he did. I think everyone expected him to be good. I don't think everyone expected him to be as good as he was. Sillinger as well. Owen Sillinger, I think, has been a real surprise for a lot of people. But for the most part, the roster is what it is. I'm not expecting any huge surprises on opening night. So now we just have to kind of wait and see until Monday's opening night roster. But I think the play tonight is going to play into it. I think the play tomorrow night, which is the second preseason game against Pittsburgh, is going to play into it. And we'll have some fun. And then we'll talk about it next week, about the final 23-man squad. I want to talk a little bit about Gavin Brindley next. Obviously, sucks that he got injured. We'll talk about what that means, and kind of what the forecast looks like for Brindley going forward. So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page where you place your bets. So if you want to put money on the Blue Jackets winning the season opener on Thursday night, you can do that at FanDuel. And here's the best bit. If you put $5 on literally anything that you want, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, whether you win or lose. So go crazy. You can bet on a favorite. You can bet on a contender. You can bet on something that is basically bound to win, or you can go crazy with it. Pick the Blue Jackets to win the cup. Doesn't matter what you bet on. As long as you bet $5, you can get $200 in bonus bets. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We've talked a little bit about tonight's game, what the lineup looks like, what we're expecting. Obviously, one fairly sizable piece of news in terms of guys pushing for a roster spot. Gavin Brindley broke his finger on Tuesday night against the Blues. He's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, which really sucks because, again, I thought he had one of his best games against the Blues. He got to play a couple of games on a line with Fantilli. Like, it was looking good. It was looking solid. And then the Blue Jackets injury curse hits early. Out 4 to 6 weeks, which is not the worst. Obviously, we are hoping for more on the 4-week side of things than the 6-week side of things. But we're not going to see Brindley until November. And I guess depending on how the season is looking for the Blue Jackets, like, if the way that the roster is working for them that first month, do they then just decide, okay, we'll send him down to Cleveland? I assume he'll go down to Cleveland either way to like rehab and get back up to game speed, but I don't know that they're going to want to change things up if things are working. If things aren't working, if in a month's time, we're talking about how the Blue Jackets season is already over and it's November 2nd, then maybe they do put him into the lineup. But for a guy that was pushing for a roster spot, for a guy that was looking like maybe he had a case to make the roster, really, really tough time to get injured. Really unfortunate for Brindley. Hopefully he is back sooner rather than later. In other news, they sent Ole Julian Bjorkvik home, got sent to the Monsters, which is funny because I didn't realize he was still here. I thought he'd been sent down a while ago, but like I talked about it in the first segment, they're basically down to NHL locks and like 3 or 4 extra guys. So now that Brindley's on IR, doesn't have to be on the 23-man roster. So we'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, there's still noise that they want to add another forward, either via the waiver wire, via trade. Who knows? But Brindley's injury, kind of gutting for a guy that I think had a really solid chance to potentially make this lineup. We'll cross our fingers that he comes back even stronger, even better, and tears up Cleveland when he gets there, probably in 4 to 6 weeks. Again, it'll be like a rehab stint. He might be down there for 2 weeks. He might be down there for longer. It really depends on what the Blue Jackets are doing, what their lineup looks like, etc., etc. Well, that's kind of it for Brindley news. I want to talk about one kind of final thing here, which is I talked a lot yesterday about, is there a reason for optimism based on what the preseason has looked like so far? Should we temper our expectations? Is this going to turn out like, another strong preseason that immediately falls apart? Like, I think the Blue Jackets went like 6 or 7-0 in the year that they then went 0-8 to start the regular season. It was the first year that they had Brandon Saad. So it would have been the 2015-16 season, I think, if I'm remembering right. Like, how do they avoid falling on their face basically as soon as the regular season starts, But there's a couple of things that I have liked in terms of not necessarily maybe systems specifically, but I've liked watching the Blue Jackets play. It's felt a lot more structured than it has in a couple of years. I think that's probably due to, Dean Everson, more experienced head coach. The Blue Jackets had 2 first-time NHL head coaches before that. This is looking a lot more, not maybe like mirror image of the Tortorella years, but it's looking a lot more structured. It's looking a lot more stable. And it looks like the players know what they're doing, which is always a bonus. Someone made a really great point on YouTube, and I just want to pull up that comment to. So SNT7756 commented that one thing I've noticed, they're taking a lot more shot attempts than the last several years. So far in the preseason, I haven't found myself screaming at the TV to shoot the puck. That's always been my frustration with the team and the previous systems that they try to fit into. Other teams seem to fire away and not wait for the perfect opportunity. I think if they can keep up the attempt, there's reason for optimism. That's one thing I have liked. Another thing that I have liked is kind of the inverse of that, which is it feels like there is a structure in the defensive zone. It feels like, obviously, the defensive deployments haven't super changed. Obviously, there's new faces coming in, but like Werenski, Severson, Provorov are still going to eat big minutes. They're the same players they were last season, but whether it's that they've got new partners, whether it's that there's a new system, whether it's just that like they figured out how to play together, I don't know. But it feels like there is a much more solid defensive structure in the team right now. And I think, again, I think the goaltending has been pretty good, but I don't know if is it a case of does the goaltending make the defense look good or does the defense make the goaltending look good? Probably a little of column A, a little of column B, I'm not sitting here convincing myself that like this team is going to be a defensive stalwart all season and they're going to have like the fewest goals allowed of any team. I'm going to knock on wood because, again, my power is going to be used for evil. And I'm not convincing myself that, they're going to have Vezina level goaltending, but they were defensively miserable to watch last season. They had flashes of really good offense, but like the defensive structure, the defensive systems last season were god awful. And so if they can figure out a way to get basically the same players plus or minus an extra 1 or 2 guys to play sound defensive hockey, and they can, get to a point where, they are regularly out shooting teams. They are regularly out chancing teams. They are regularly outscoring teams specifically, which they've been doing in the preseason. And again, the preseason is not the regular season. It's very different. We are still tempering our expectations, but if they can continue what they're doing in the preseason into the regular season and make it sustainable, I think this team is going to be a very, very different team to watch. And also a big plus is there's a worry with a defensively minded team that it's going to be just really boring hockey to watch. Like I think about the Islanders, for example, who were very, very solid defensively for a long time. And it was also like watching grass grow, the Blue Jackets have been fun to watch this preseason. I think, it's been energetic. I think the youth has helped. They make mistakes. They work hard to get the mistakes back. It looks like everyone cares, which was not necessarily true for all of last season. We'll see again what that translates into the regular season. But I am seeing things in the preseason that makes me think this is sustainable. This is a reason for optimism. Again, I'm not going to be surprised if they do not quite manage to keep this up for the entire regular season. Every team has kind of ups and downs, but I think this team especially is going to have some ups and downs emotionally, physically. Obviously, injuries are going to play a part because this team can't seem to never, ever not be injured. I think that was too many double negatives, but my point still stands. This team is going to get injured because that's how the NHL, the nationwide arena curse works. But I continue to be, I was going to say quietly optimistic, but considering I've been talking for 20 minutes today and I talked for 25 minutes yesterday about how optimistic I am, cautiously optimistic, I think is a better way of putting it. We'll see. We'll see how tonight goes. I feel like again, I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I feel like the Penguins are always the big challenge, whether that's the regular season or preseason or whatever. If they can get up for a game against the Penguins today and tomorrow, we'll see how it goes. And I think maybe we'll feel a little bit worse or a little bit better after both tonight and tomorrow night's game. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's fun. That's kind of where I'm at now, is I would like this season to be fun to watch, which is a weird thing to say when you consider, what heavy hearts everyone is playing with, and, the Gaudreau loss is going to be hanging over the entire season, but I think, and the players have talked about this a lot as well, is that they've talked a lot about, well, John would want us to have fun. John would want us to go out there and play hockey. John would want us to smile and laugh and enjoy this. So that's what we're going to do. And I think that's fake it till you make it. If you convince yourself that you're going to have fun, then I think you will generally have fun. So I think that to me feels a little bit like what's happening. We'll see again when, we're in the real trenches of the season of, it's the middle of January and everyone's miserable because it's -20 outside and they have to go to Edmonton and everything is, there's injuries and it's a long season and you maybe lose a couple of games in a row. We'll see if they can manage to keep that energy up. But as someone who is not kind of in the room, obviously I don't have the credentials because it's a hell of a commute from my apartment to Nationwide Arena. As everydayers will know, that's not doable. As someone who's not in the room, as someone who's kind of watching from the outside, there is a kind of determined joy to how they've approached this season of, Johnny would want us to have fun, so we're going to have fun. And I think that kind of positive thinking is something that carries a lot more weight than I had initially kind of taken into consideration when I was thinking about this season. So we'll see. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully tonight's game is fun. I will be watching. I will be yelling on Twitter about the Penguins. Jake Gensel isn't there to torment me anymore, which means I'm going to have to find a new Penguin to yell about when they inevitably make me and my team sad. But we'll talk about that in tomorrow's episode. We'll talk about tonight's game. We'll take a look at the roster for tomorrow night's game. And we're feeling positive. We are tempering our expectations, but we are feeling cautiously optimistic here at Locked On Blue Jackets. Thank you for listening, making us your first listen of the day every single day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. We are getting closer and closer to that 1,000 subscriber mark. So if you haven't hit subscribe yet, become an everydayer and hit the subscriber button. And it'll help me out and it'll make your life much, much easier if you want to watch the show every day, every other day, once a week, what have you. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.